The world rugby values are passion, respect, solidarity, integrity, and discipline. So that's when the game is over, however tough and sometimes violent it can be during the game itself, at the end of the game, you shake hands legitimately.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumitech, sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Synergy Global, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, Birthright Excel, Serona Partners, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. I am so excited for this episode. We're about to meet Pete Sickle, the CEO of the Tel Aviv Heat. This is a story like no other. It is a different kind of startup story, one that has to do with sports, it has to do with team, with values. And it's fascinating all around to hear how a sports team is formed, the different challenges that come with it, and the similarities to how close it is to running a tech startup. Thank you, Pete, for joining me in this amazing, amazing conversation, and enjoy, everyone. We're in beautiful Palcalcon.
What a day.
Talking about leadership in a different way. A lot of times I have CEOs from software companies, venture capital investors, cyber CEOs, but here we have a CEO of a sports team with a journey that is just as fascinating as the formation of this team, which is its own startup in its own right and its own fascinating journey. Pete, thank you so much for being here.
Really happy to be here. Thanks much.
We were spending meaningful time together talking about political science, international relations, and global history. And today we're talking about how you're running Tel Aviv Heat and you're competing globally with the rugby team that you founded.
Yeah.
How does that work? What happened there?
Yeah, so rugby the game has gone through a lot of kind of transitions. It's an old game, but it's only been professional for the last 27 years, since 95. There are kind of the haves and the have-nots. So the top rugby nations in the world, England, France, New Zealand, and so on, they compete against one another, but there's something the tier 2 nations have a hard time getting parity to tier 1. So World Rugby, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, said, we need to have an initiative that's going to help promote tier 2 rugby to improve their rugby. They went to Rugby Europe and said, let's start a new professional competition. And Rugby Europe went out and tapped, there's something called the Six Nations, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, France, and Italy. Let's take the next 7 highest ranked teams in Europe and start a competition. 7's a bad number for a competition, so they opened an 8th wildcard slot. They put out then a request for bids. Any union in Rugby Europe's territory, Israel is in Rugby Europe's territory.
Now I want to pause the story at this moment because I want to take you back for a second, back to your college days.
Yeah.
Because rugby, I would go and I would see this in the news and I would say, okay, that's awesome. They have an eighth slot. But you saw that and you said, okay, this plays back to something in your own personal history that ties back in with an opportunity here.
Yeah, well, actually, I wasn't involved at this stage. So this is how Israel got invited to put in a bid into this new competition. So about a year and a half ago, the bid went in, and almost exactly a year ago, March of 2021, Rugby Europe said, congratulations, you're in. And everyone sort of said, when? They said, no, now. First season. It had never happened. When does it start? September. First game, September. So in March, we were a PowerPoint. It was a PowerPoint presentation to Rugby Europe. Rugby Europe was very impressed, saw the opportunity for a country like Israel, which is not tier 2 in rugby terms, really kind of tier 4. So those other 7 teams were ranked somewhere between 12th in the world and 25th in the world. Israel's ranked 60th in the world. So they were taking a real risk on us, but they were very impressed by the vision that we had, that given the opportunity to play rugby at a professional level against other talented teams, you could actually transform a country from tier 4 to tier 2 and hopefully above.
And your personal interest with rugby?
So I was introduced to rugby in high school in Los Angeles. Luckily, we had a teacher and a coach. He was American, but had lived in New Zealand, and he coached us in football and then sort of said, if you guys were really tough, you'd play rugby. He did a little Jedi mind trick, and we said, what's that? And he started a rugby team. We fell in love right away. Look, I had played football and basketball and baseball in high school, but there was something special about rugby, not only kind of the freedom and the flow of the game on the field, but the thing that really got me was the rugby values. And I do want to spend some time on that because it's an important aspect, not only for my personal journey in rugby, but I think it's critical to understanding kind of the Tel Aviv Heat.
And before you start that, we met, I believe, 7 or 8 months ago.
Yeah.
We were sitting in a coffee shop, and for about 5 or 10 minutes, you were telling me about the rugby values. And I had no idea what rugby was until then.
Yeah.
I spent the next 3 or 4 hours watching rugby on YouTube and really trying to understand what you were talking about. And it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, look, long before, I mean, we all know we're in the era, and luckily, that's valuing inclusion and respect and equality and so on. Rugby has lived those values for decades and decades. So, the world rugby values are passion, respect, solidarity, integrity, and discipline. So that's when the game is over, however tough and sometimes violent it can be during the game itself, at the end of the game, you shake hands legitimately, genuinely.
What does that mean? Because every team, is supposed to shake hands after every sport.
These guys are, if you really look carefully, if you watch a rugby game at the end, these are guys who have really been crashing into each other, are giving each other genuine hugs. And the tradition in rugby is the home team then actually hosts the visiting team. And so even at the highest professional levels, you'll find the losing team gets invited into the winning team's locker room for a beer.
Really?
And these guys are sitting down next. I don't know of that in any other sport. The only thing to me that comes close to it is kind of boxing, martial arts, judo, where there's this mutual respect. Yes, I tried to beat you into submission. But once it's over, thank you for letting me compete against you.
Amazing.
And so on a team sport level, I don't know of any other team sport that really matches this. So for us on the Tel Aviv Heat journey, once the bid was approved, I got invited to join the founding team. There were 3 or 4 people who put the bid together. A year ago, I was asked to come in. We didn't have a team name. We didn't have $1 in the bank. We had no players signed. We had a head coach. He was Kevin Musikant, who was already the Israeli national team coach. So he was already in Israel. But he grew up in South Africa. He had been coaching for 20 years. He had lots of experience, but he started coaching at a young age. Injuries from his playing days made him shift over to the coaching side earlier probably than he wanted. So he's a young guy with lots of experience, which is pretty unique. He had made Aliyah. He had emigrated to Israel a few years prior. So we were very, very fortunate that we had kind of the right person in the right place at the right time to build the team.
But take me back to that day that you joined.
Yeah.
The day that you decided that your journey now is to be a co-founder and CEO of this new project, what was going to turn into a crazy startup.
Yeah.
That you're going to have, like any CEO of any tech startup, you're going to have to do everything, just like everybody's doing everything.
Yeah.
Trying to get this running. Where's your head at? How do you even structure what your priorities are?
Yeah.
And what you're trying to achieve now? And you have a deadline that you have to face.
Yeah.
Unlike many startups.
Yeah. Well, I didn't come in as CEO. There were sort of 5 or 6 of us that were all dedicated to this new mission, this opportunity.
We want to do this.
We're the founding team. And we didn't come in with set roles. Who can do what? Our first, we had, I think, until May to sign a participation agreement with Rugby Europe.
And
are you guys in? And we're in March.
And right now it's just a vision.
It's a vision. It's a PowerPoint presentation. It's a powerful vision, but we have no resources. We don't have, so the first sort of mission was, we need to make sure that we can be viable financially. We have to make sure before we sign a single contract that we will have enough that we can actually field a team of a sufficient quality that we can compete at a higher level than our Israeli players have ever competed.
And if you don't get this by May, you may have to wait.
We may have to say, thanks for the invitation. We'll see you in a year. So full court press from March to May. Let's see how much money we can raise. Luckily, by May, we had raised about 1/3 of our target for our seed round. And we sort of said, okay, if we can do this before we have a single player sign in a single game, then we're on to something. Our vision is not just the 5 or 6 of us. Others can see the opportunity and the value that we can create in the future. So we signed our participation agreement. In June, then, we were going from the just raising that seed capital to we need to really start defining roles and getting operational. We are going to need to secure a stadium. We are going to need to start signing contracts and so on.
How do you pitch a sports team at that capacity? A new sport that most people here probably don't know what rugby is.
Yeah.
No players yet.
Yeah.
A shared vision.
Yeah.
Global competition. What is the pitch?
Yeah. Well, to tell you the truth, the pitch was most receptive outside of Israel.
Yeah.
And so the early investors were either very passionate about rugby and saw this amazing, there aren't that many, one of the great strengths of rugby is its great tradition.
Yep.
But here was an opportunity to build a club from the ground, from scratch. And so for people who've been around rugby and have their passionate affinities with their clubs and so on, they were really attracted to, wow, I've always thought if I were to build my own, now I have an opportunity to be part of that. So we had the hardcore rugby people who were drawn to it. We also had people who are hardcore supporters of Israel and said, I don't know anything about rugby, but if this is going to help elevate Israel on the world stage, I want to be part of it. And, you know, how can I help? How can I support? And then, of course, we had people who were both, who were, longtime ardent supporters of Israel, but also passionate rugby people. And so the pitch was, this will be the vehicle to elevate rugby in Israel. Down the road, we see a path that if we can install a professional environment here in Israel and sustain it, that someday down the line, Israel will be in a position to vie for a spot in the Olympics, to qualify for the Rugby World Cup, which right now seems impossible. Right now seems impossible. But now, a year later, it doesn't seem impossible at all.
Wow. And at that point, we're still in April, May of last year.
Exactly.
Incredible.
Yep.
You're in May, you secure a third of the funding.
Yep.
You sign the contracts. You say, we're committing to this. We're going to do this.
Yeah. So we signed the contract with Rugby Europe. They still hadn't announced. They were still in stealth mode. So look, the challenge was to go to, we didn't want just investors, we needed investor support, but really for this to be a viable model, we need sponsorship, we need television, there are lots of things that we need.
Sure. And
we couldn't really go to the sponsors until Rugby Europe was going to announce, and with their sponsors, right. So they announced in July. So it's not really until July that we could really engage with sponsors, because Rugby Europe says you can't really announce this thing. And we were waiting for Rugby Europe to announce their sponsors. So we can't.
When is the season starting?
September.
So you already have 4 months of training from when you're getting to this contract, and now you're taking it down to 2 months of training because you can't really train properly because you don't have the resources yet.
We don't have the resources. So most of our contracts were actually signed in July and August.
Wow.
For players. And it's hard to believe now, but now, and I'll explain it, but we didn't know who would actually sign up for this thing.
Wow.
Who would take the chance to come play rugby? And we didn't have a name. So the Tel Aviv Heat was, I'd like to say it was fully market researched. And a few of us was, oh, no, that sounds good. We found a logo designer online and here, let's go. We were very, very fortunate. As I mentioned, Kevin Musikamp is the director of rugby and the head coach. The first hire was his assistant coach, which is a guy, Dimitri Katrakilis, who also had his playing career cut short because of injury. But Dimitri and Kevin then had an extensive network of former teammates of Dimitri Katrakilis. So when we were trying to get players to come on, we couldn't wow them with money. Right. We couldn't entice them that this was a get-rich enterprise. But the story, and it was a legitimate story, was we're going to give you a great team to play for. You're going to love playing for this team because it is built around players and what's important to players. And I think this is what separates us from the professional rugby environment. which really treats these players, and I'm hearing this from the players themselves, whether they're playing in professional leagues in South Africa or England or France, they're treated like assets. And as long as that asset...
How does that come to play in the day-to-day? What happens in the day-to-day of the management of the team that differentiates between assets or resources that you're just managing?
Yeah. So the first and foremost, we want to make sure that we're meeting their needs. We know a year ago that to get them to take the risk to take the leap of faith to come play for the Tel Aviv Heat, they have to know that they're coming to an environment where they are valued and trusted and listened to. And so I've tried to, over the course of the last several months, meet with each player one-on-one. And after they were signed, after they already played, tell me what's been your experience. And without fail, it's been some variation on, this is my best experience in rugby. This is the first time I've been listened to. You guys really care what we think and we need and we feel. So if we didn't do that, we would have a very, very hard time recruiting and sustaining talent.
Is this something, so what you're talking about here, building a culture, right? And this is something that every CEO of every startup, is tackling. Is this an intentional thing that you set out to say, I need every player to know that they're listened to? So if yes, what's your plan of attack? Okay, so great. So you signed a player. What do you as a CEO then strategically do to get him in 3 months to come back and say, you know what, I really feel like you listened to me in these last 3 months?
Well, first of all, it's to listen to them. So I spent time with them. In a way it is though. And you and I know each other from I used to be a teacher. Right. And so when I was a young teacher, I needed to prove myself by telling the students how much I knew. That's not effective teaching. So the more I got into it and taught at high school and university, the most effective, the most value I could create in the classroom was not in what I said, it's in what I could get students to discover. And so taking that attitude and approach, they needed to know that I was there, not just some guy that's name is on the contract and I never see you again. So we were on the road for the whole month of October. I was with them. I was with them on the bus. I was folding their laundry in the hotel in Moscow. I was asking them, how are things going? When I met them for the first time, because these guys are coming from professional environments.
Right.
They are coming from clubs that paid them much more, that have a huge organization and huge fan base and so on. And I'd say, thanks for taking the leap of faith and joining us. We want to give you the best experience that you possibly can have. And if we're not, come tell me. Let me know how we can make this better. And then making sure that when that did happen, we weren't defensive, we weren't evasive, we're listening, and we could have honest conversations and say, I would love to give you that. Maybe in season 2, we're building towards that or whatever. So they needed to know that any promise we made, we delivered on it.
Right.
And when we couldn't deliver on it, we didn't make false promises.
Right. So that transparency, intentionality.
That we're all in this together. We can't do it without you. And so my attitude as a CEO, I mean, I don't know how cliche it is or whatever, but I see myself as a servant leader. So, the job of the coach, the job of the player is to compete, right? Let's not forget, it is a competition. It's to score more points than your opposition. It's to win games and so on. But we know from so much research and so much psychology, the environment that you create for players is critical to how they perform on the field. So now the coach's job and the coaching staff, their job is to create that environment.
Sure.
My job is to make sure that the coaching environment has the resources to actually deliver it. So it's starting with the players and moving backwards. And again, it's not about what can you do for the team, what can the team do for you. Sorry if it's cliche, but that was critical from the very get-go. And so I think for the fact that I was a coach was very important for me coming. It's not because, I'm a financial whiz or whatever. So when I'm talking to the coach and he says, I need this for the players and so on, we're speaking the same language.
Exactly. We're in September.
Yeah.
you as the leader, as one of the leaders there, you guys have to align expectations.
Yeah.
It's a competition.
Yeah.
You're bringing in competitors that used to compete in the professional sphere.
Yeah.
And you're approaching your first season.
Yeah.
This is going to be the first time that you're competing as a team.
Yeah.
A lot at stake.
Yeah.
Sponsors, investors. This is setting yourself up for season 2.
Yeah.
How do you strategically think through, okay, what do I do now as a CEO, as a leader here?
Yeah.
To align expectations?
Yeah. Yeah, look, we're very, very lucky on several regards. Again, the people who came at it from the rugby world did not expect us to cobble it. Look, we had players obviously from Israel, from South Africa, from Fiji, from UK, from Namibia, from Ireland.
That moved here.
That we would assemble together. So in season 1, look, there was also COVID, let's not forget.
Yeah.
So when we were planning our preseason, end of August, Israel was closed.
Wow.
So I can't tell you how many scenarios we considered for our we ended up at preseason in South Africa. Couldn't get the guys. We had 6 players from Fiji, couldn't get them into South Africa because they needed visas and the consulate in Fiji was closed. So we meet in Georgia about 5 days before our first game.
This is the first time.
Well, most of the team meets in South Africa, but the Fijians, so the whole team is together. Exactly. The whole team is together a few days before our first game. We play against the Georgian Black Lion.
That is a team.
It's a team sport. It's
value-driven sport.
Absolutely. With communication and collaboration. And if there's a little bit of a misalignment in defense, they score. So really. Now we lose our first game, but Georgia is ranked 12th in the world. And a large percentage of the players taking the field that day play on the Georgia national team. So we lost, but by like 20 points. It was respectable. I know that sounds weird, a respectable loss, but immediately we were getting attention from around the world in the rugby. How did you guys do that? How did you do that? And it all comes back to personal relationships and trust. So that Kevin and Dimitri could talk to players. They knew the players some of them had burnt out on rugby. Some of them were looking for a contract and were no longer cost effective for whatever. Wow. We'll take you. Come play with us. We'll give you it. Now, we lose. Again, respectable loss. They're singing in the locker room. And I mean singing. Some of you might think of dirty songs. These are the Fijians singing in 4-part harmony. These are guys singing Jojo Losa, the kind of South African work song. These guys are singing on the bus. And so we're the coaches and we're looking at each other. Okay, we're tapping into something special. If you can walk off the field losing by 20 points and be singing with one another, it's because you're seeing each other as family.
Wow.
And so again, when we started recruiting, we were wondering who's going to come play with us. And as soon as someone said, I'll sign up, wow, we were so excited. Right now, we have a waiting list of 200 players at an elite level because they're hearing from their friends.
Incredible.
About Tel Aviv. How do I get involved? How do I get a spot on the Tel Aviv Heat? We got interest from top professional clubs in South Africa, in England, in Australia, New Zealand. How did you guys do that? What are you guys doing? You came out of nowhere to where you are in 4 months. And I think what we've exposed is there's a lot of conventional thinking. I don't want to say in sports in general, but in the rugby world, there's a lot of conventional thinking that, and I'm getting this from the conversations from players about their former professional environments. Every hour is scheduled. It's top down. It's do this. Here's the program, fit in or get out because we'll find someone younger and cheaper. And that just seems like an antiquated. So look, we expect high professional standards. They should be playing incredibly competitive rugby on the field. But when we're not in the gym or on the training session or watching films, we trust them to figure out what they need to do. Because if we can build that culture of trust and camaraderie and mutual respect, and it's not about enforcing it, it's about inspiring them.
I love it.
So that to me Once we knew that these guys are singing on the bus, win, lose, or draw, we knew we were into something special. We time after time after time conversation. So we had one player, I'll just give you Gabriele Batoya. He played for England U20s. He was playing at the highest level of club rugby in England. He had gone to France, hadn't worked out, not a good fit culture. He was released. He came to play with us because Dimitri and Gabs had played with each other in the Harlequins. Amazing player, but no ego. And so this is something our marketing officer's daughter just won the world championship in Azerbaijan over the weekend in world acrobatics.
Wow.
And we were talking about this. What does it take to be a world champion? You have to be very, very confident, but you also have to be very, very humble. You have to be confident that you are going to perform when the stress and everything is on the line. But you have to be humble enough to do the work that you need in order to put yourself into that position of confidence. So Gabs, look, he got a contract offer to go back and play for a professional club in Scotland. It didn't work out. He calls us, hey, can I come back? For a fraction of the salary that these top. So after our last regular season game, I give him a hug and say, thanks so much for taking a chance. Thanks so much for coming back. And he says, look, Pete, this is the best experience I've ever had in rugby.
Incredible.
So now he did sign a contract now to play for the Bristol Bears, one of the top teams in the English Premiership. Of course, we're sad to lose him. He's not going to be playing for us in season 2, but we're so proud that just having this opportunity of coming to play for the Tel Aviv Heat now is a launching pad. So
Incredible.
If we can create this culture where 200 guys are on the waiting list, how do I get in? If they come and play for the Tel Aviv Heat and they go on to bigger and better things, I think it's not a loss, it's a feather in our cap.
Where do you fit into all of this? Where's Pete in this thing called Tel Aviv Heat, this new startup?
Yeah. So, look, season 1 was, we didn't have the luxury of time. We didn't have the luxury of budget to really build out a front office. So it was all hands on deck. We were very fortunate. A number of people volunteered their time, pitched in. We were outside of our comfort zone. We tried not to cross lanes, but crossing over, people not doing their core competencies because we had to make it happen. We didn't have time. The go-to-market schedule was dictated to us.
Yeah.
So we couldn't say, oh, let's spend another month and fix the bugs before we release. No, there's a calendar. The other team's waiting.
Yep.
So we went through COVID. Luckily, no one tested positive. We played all 6 games, although we had to relocate 2 of our home games to Georgia, and we're really lucky to have them as friends and hosts. My job then as CEO, as I mentioned, is to make sure that the coaches and the players have what they need to perform. Of course, I need to be able to communicate our story. I need to be able to share how we're creating value, not only in the short term, but in the long term. So originally, I think we were very focused on building our fan base from the inside out. And very quickly, what we understood was there are rugby fans around the world and Israel fans around the world that love supporting us. We're getting stories of my mom has never watched. She's watching the game. She's cheering. She's ordered the sweatshirt. We've tapped into something that I think in a way professional sports at some level gets inauthentic. It gets too commercialized, too glossy, too removed, too commoditized. And so I think we have this amazing opportunity to be kind of everyone's second favorite team. So keep rooting for your team in Argentina, Australia, England. You have season tickets. You're going to go to the game and cheer them. But now we have another team, an underdog story.
A family.
It's a family. It's inclusive. So those rugby values of passion, solidarity, respect, it's not just on a PowerPoint. Everything we need to do as an organization, every interaction we have internally with external stakeholders has to be demonstrating that, because we can't fall back. There is no There's no 100 years of tradition. There's no, long list of donors that every year write their. We don't have that. We have to create it. So I think in the end, my job is to make sure that those rugby values are inculcated and really embraced throughout the organization, but also bringing the kind of startup nation, entrepreneurship, innovation into the rugby world. And so, again, as we talk to other clubs, other unions, Rugby Europe, we exceeded expectations and then some, because in a way, look, when we started, we're like, we don't have support. There is no cushion. There is no, and once we realized to lean into that, there's no one saying that's not how we do it. There's no one saying, here are the lines. We don't have to think out of the box. There is no box.
There is no box.
So that opens up all kinds of possibilities. So looking ahead for season 2, my job is to make sure that we're growing this worldwide fan base. We are starting to attract look, we were very lucky. Our initial sponsors, SciTech and MyHeritage, based here, saw the value, understood that this was an opportunity to get in at the beginning. But now we're starting to attract global brands. So we're just about to announce, I guess now, Royal Caribbean is coming on, Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. We're about to go to South Africa for a 10-day tour on the invitation of the Blue Bulls, one of the best teams in the world.
Wow.
So yeah, we're really excited for season 2.
Startup season 2.
I think our challenge then is we can as far as my job, of course, it's to find those partners, whether they're investors or sponsors, who are going to grow with us on this worldwide level. But it's to make sure as an organization, we do not lose that ability to provide a safe, trusting environment where it's about the players, it's about the employees, it's about caring and making sure that they're having a valuable experience. And again, going back to the listening, what do you need and how can we give it to you?
The intrinsic motivation here, I mean, that's the theme of this whole conversation. Yep. I mean, everybody's talking about how team and culture is everything. It's so rare to find. And I think what you're talking about here, it truly embodies the spirit of authentic intrinsic motivation, building a culture of mutual respect, mutual responsibility, not a top-down, here's a schedule, fit in or fit out. This is the team. This is our shared vision. Yeah, right now we're five people around a table. Okay, now we actually are signing the contract. Okay, now we're actually a team. And maybe we come together just 5 days before the game. And maybe we lose the game in a respectable way. But we're still going to sing together. And because we're doing it authentically, we're going to sing the whole ride back on the bus. And we're getting prepared for season 2. And Tel Aviv Heat is a family before it's a sports team.
Absolutely.
And I think that's just, for me, as a learner, as a listener here, that's inspiring. And Pete, thank you for years of inspiration beyond just this conversation. Best of luck with season 2. It's phenomenal. I can't believe, hearing this story that I didn't know most of it now. From hearing about it 7 months ago, just incredible. And I'm going to take a lot of lessons to my own company one day from what you're embodying here and the spirit that you're bringing as the CEO and as one of the leaders of this great family. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.